Executive consultants, you're welcome. In our two previous videos, we saw how to create a company under Tally, and then we also looked at the gateway of Tally, and we said that when we come back, today we'll be looking at each of the items that fall under the 4 items. And we're starting with the masters, and we are going to put our focus today on group ledgers, how to create them, and how you can delete them. So let us get into the journey of creating ledgers. So we said that we're going to do with masters and we are going to do with accounts info. And if you remember, I said you can use a keyboard or you can use a mouse. And I'm going to use a keyboard and I'll press on to get on the accounts info. So they open up and they bring group ledgers and then ledgers themselves. I must tell you that Tally has predetermined groups. So you may decide to use them or you may decide to open up your own. So like we can see when I press on the groups, you can see that we have single groups and then we have multiple groups. We'll get to know the difference between the two as we move on. So let us try to see the few tallies, a few groups that are already predetermined by the software. And you can choose to use these, or you can choose to probably use others that you feel are fit for you and that will be easier for you to identify. So going back to single group and then multiple groups, I must tell you that under single group, we are going to create a primary group, and then we use the multiple groups creation to create the secondary groups. Meaning, even in groups, we have the major groups and then we have the subgroups. We create the majors from the single group and then we create the multiples we create the secondary under the multiple groups. So let us create one because we don't want to use what the system has given us. Let us come up with ours, and that's going to help us clearly to identify our work. So this is how it comes about. The page is opened and then you're allowed to name whichever group you would want to create under the ledgers. So I will say maybe we have incomes, and because for the matters of auditing and accounting, we would need maybe to give them codes. So allow me give mine a code which is 1000, and I would say these are all known as incomes. So I'll say code 1000 represents incomes, and then I'll simply come and then they will ask me, because when I press under, they are going to ask me whether I want to make it a primary group or to put it under these groups that are here to be a secondary group. But because we want to use a primary group, we want to create our own. So I'll say primary. And when I press primary, then they ask me which kind of group is it? Is it an asset, expenses, or incomes? Because the name says 1000 incomes, then we'll say income. And then they will ask us, does it affect the gross profits? By nature of business, we get miscellaneous incomes. And if you remember from your P&L, you might know that gross profit is going to be affected once we get such miscellaneous income. So we are going to say yes. And the system, by the mere fact that we said it's a primary group, so the system will automatically tell us it cannot affect, it can't behave like a sub-ledger. Though, if you want, you can still do it. Remember, when you're creating, you're putting up what you want everything to be like. You're not playing to the system, you're playing the game the way you want it to appear. So the system already has default answers, but you can still choose to change them. Then they ask us, do you want a debit or a credit balance for reporting? Because accounting, we are all about communication and informing. Then we'll say yes, because we want to have those different balances once we tap on that group ledger. So the other bit that will ask us is used for calculations, e.g. taxes, discounts. I must put a disclaimer that if you are using a licensed model, not the education model, the moment you press yes here, they'll give you more details, for you to set the discounts, for you to put in the taxation information and all that. But because we are basically using educational mode and we are being more tutorial, we are not allowed to do that. So they ask us the method to allocate when used in purchase invoice. So they are simply asking us if at all we get to use this particular ledger in the purchasing of anything, should we appropriate it by quantity, value, or no appropriation? And like I said, we are basically being basic and we are learning. So I will not say let us go by appropriate by quantity, because these settings vary from one company to another. So if your company says we'll be using the incomes ledger to appropriate it by quantity that we'll be purchasing, then please do as that. Or if you want it to run like that, you as an administrator, then you can choose to find one that works for you. So I would say not applicable. And once I press that, they'll ask me indirectly if I'm well satisfied with the information that I've provided, and I'll say yes by pressing Y. And once all that is done, I've created my group ledger. So let us go and look at our group ledger that we've created. Remember, when we opened this list of groups, we didn't have a group ledger known as 1000 incomes. But now after creating it, it's there, and we can now put in either sub or secondary groups, or we can simply leave it at that. But because we want to make our work easier, we don't want the whole thing to be incomes, we can go ahead and then create multiples, because we said it is under multiple groups that we are going to create the secondary groups. So we'll create a few secondary groups under our incomes. And then maybe we'll say 1001, and that is maybe accommodation. And then we will say maybe 1002, and that is a bar. And lastly, 1003, and that we call it a gym. So meaning all these things that we are going to sell, once we put in the respective ledgers, it will either be for accommodation, it will be under a bar, or it will be under a gym, and it will all be incomes. And hence, if we make transactions using one of the ledgers that will be under these three, then it will automatically put income to our profit and loss account. So we are done creating subgroups or secondary groups under incomes, and then we simply say yes. And once that is done, that means we've created single groups, a single group known as incomes, and then we've also created multiple groups under incomes. Meaning when we start to put in items or ledgers that will be under accommodation, perhaps bread and breakfast, or the gym trainer, that will be falling under the gym, and then perhaps whiskey or soft drinks, they will be falling under the bar. So in our next lecture, we'll be going into the individual ledgers. We'll put individual ledgers to the groups that we've created under multiple. Executive consultants, don't forget to subscribe, share this link, and follow, and click the bell for updates and new videos that are yet to come. Executive consultants, good evening.